Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 4250 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar number 418, H.R. 4250, a bill to amend the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act to provide an alternative process for review of safety and effectiveness of non-prescription sunscreen active ingredients and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Whitfield, and the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Dingell, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky.
I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend the remarks and insert extraneous materials in the record on the bill.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I would yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 4250, the Sunscreen Innovation Act, which seeks to address an important area of public concern by strengthening the sunscreen ingredient review process at the Food and Drug Administration. I would like to remind everyone that skin cancer is the most prevalent kind of cancer in America. Each year, there are more new cases of skin cancer than breast, prostate, lung, and colon cancer combined. By 2015, it is estimated that 1 in 50 Americans will develop melanoma in their lifetime. Melanoma also happens to be one of the most common forms of cancer in young adults, particularly young women. Even though the Food and Drug Administration has listed action on sunscreen ingredient application as a priority, since 2008, no new sunscreen ingredients have been approved by the FDA. In fact, none have been approved in 15 years. This is despite the fact that 8 sunscreen applications have been pending at the FDA, some as far back as 2002. I might add that we find ourselves in this predicament even though in Europe and other places around the world, new sunscreen ingredients are being introduced into the sunscreen product. This past April, the Energy and Commerce Committee held a hearing on the Sunscreen Innovation Act where all of the expert witnesses, including the FDA, were in agreement that the current approval process is broken and in need of reform. So the objective of the Sunscreen Innovation Act is twofold. First, to expedite the review of pending applications at FDA, and second, to create a timely and transparent process for new applications to be reviewed and acted on. The framework outlined in this legislation strikes an appropriate balance between consumer safety and access to the very best sunscreen product. The bill we have before us today reflects a bipartisan agreement reached in consultation with the Food and Drug Administration and outside stakeholders such as the PASS Coalition and Environmental Working Group. I want to give particular thanks to my colleague, Mr. Dingell from Michigan, for sponsoring this legislation with me. I'd also like to thank Chairman Upton, who worked with us closely throughout the entire process, and Ranking Member Waxman for their assistance in reaching an agreement that allows this legislation to come to the floor. I want to urge all my colleagues to support the bill, and I, at this time, would reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 4250, the Sunscreen Innovation Act. This legislation proves that this body can work together, not only across the aisle, but with the agencies under our jurisdiction and also with the industries concerned. This legislation has support of everyone. There is no opposition to it, and that includes the industry, it includes the health people. It also includes the environmentalists, and it includes the administration. UV rays from the sun are, it is understood, increasing the amount of melanoma amongst our people enormously. 800% amongst young women, 400% amongst young men over the past 40 years. Sunscreens sold in the United States today do not offer the same level of protection as sunscreens sold in Europe, Canada, Australia, and other countries. In fact, the last over-the-counter sunscreen ingredient was approved by FDA in the 1990s. Some sunscreen ingredients have been waiting review by FDA for over a decade. This is inexcusable, and it should not be permitted because FDA has taken so long to review these applications. It's clear that increased accountability is needed at the agency to ensure these pending sunscreen applications are reviewed in a timely and speedy manner. I want to commend and congratulate my colleague, Mr. Whitfield, for his leadership and fine work on this, and also Chairman Upton for his outstanding work. And I want to congratulate my friends Mr. Pallone and Mr. Waxman for the good work which they have done on this legislation. Indeed, the staffs on both sides of the committee have been remarkable in what it is they have done on this matter. And it is interesting to note that we have the strong support of the American Academy of Dermatology, the American Cancer Society Action Network, the Melanoma Research Alliance, the Environmental Working Group, and the Melanoma Research Foundation. And I ask unanimous consent to insert letters from those agencies into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
I would like to observe that the staff has performed extraordinary work on this matter. I want to congratulate and thank Greg Sundstrom on my staff, as well as Taylor Booth, John Stone, Carly McWilliams, Eric Flam for their hard work on the legislation. And I want to recognize members of the PASS Coalition, that's PASS Coalition, for their hard work and advocacy on behalf of this important issue. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I'd like to yield 5 minutes to the Chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee, my colleague from Michigan, Mr. Upton.
The gentleman from Michigan is recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of this very important bipartisan legislation to indeed help protect the public health. H.R. 4250, the Sunscreen Innovation Act, is just that. The growing rate of skin cancer in the U.S., including melanoma, is indeed alarming. According to the American Cancer Society, more Americans are diagnosed with skin cancer every year than breast, prostate, lung, or colon cancer combined. And in 2015, this year, 1 in every 50 of our constituents is going to be diagnosed with melanoma. We've got to take every step that we can to combat this public health crisis. Sadly, advancements in sunscreen have failed to keep pace with the increased awareness of the harm overexposure to the sun can cause. And the FDA has not approved a new non-prescription sunscreen bio-ingredient for nearly 20 years, despite the fact that several applications have been pending at the agency for products that have been used safely and effectively in Europe and other parts of the world. The review process that these products have to go at the FDA is quite simply broken. It needs to be fixed, and that's what this legislation does. I particularly want to commend the work of my good friend from the great state of Michigan, Mr. Dingell, and Mr. Whitfield, and with members of our entire committee as this bill passed with unanimous support as we moved through the process. We wanted to come up with a solution to allow the FDA to fix the problem, and that's what this bill does. The Sunscreen Innovation Act is going to address the current backlog of applications pending at the FDA, as well as establish a predictable and transparent review process for new applications, incorporating meaningful input from experts and the public. The bill also establishes a number of timeframes for decision-making at the FDA and remove administrative hurdles identified by the FDA to the sunscreen approval process. More importantly, it's going to allow Americans to benefit from these products sooner while ensuring that they are indeed safe and effective. You know, we've had great success at our committee, the Energy and Commerce Committee, this Congress, with over a dozen public health bills that have already been signed into law, obviously all bipartisan. And I'm confident that this common sense bill, which received, again, unanimous support at our committee, will soon be part of our strong record of results. In fact, I'm told that this is the 61st bill that our committee has reported out that will be approved on the House floor. That's a pretty good record of achievement. This one really, like the others, has a real impact on all of our constituents. It gives the FDA the rightful tools so that we can get to the bottom of the problem, which impacts 1 in 50 Americans. So again, I want to compliment Mr. Dingell, Mr. Whitfield, Mr. Pallone, Mr. Waxman, and others for helping deliver this bill to the House floor, and I look forward for a strong vote, hopefully voice, in a few minutes, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further requests for time, so if the gentleman, my good friend Mr. Whitfield, is ready, I'm just prepared to yield back with the strong urging to my colleagues to support this bill, which is strongly bipartisan, unanimously brought forward to the Congress, and which has the strong support of both industry, government, and the health groups.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Yeah, I want to once again thank Mr. Dingell, and I appreciate him naming the staff, because there was a lot of negotiations with FDA on this bill, and Taylor Booth on my staff and other members of the Energy and Commerce Committee staff, as named by Mr. Dingell. I want to give special thanks to them. And also we appreciate the efforts of Mr. Pitts, who is the chairman of the Health Subcommittee, and without the help of he and Mr. Pallone and their staffs, we would not have been able to bring this bill to the floor. And so I urge everyone to support it, and with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill, H.R. 4250, as amended? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.